Hey, hi everyone. It's great to see you again this week. And we are very, very happy to be here today with Eugenio Tisselli, a wonderful artist, activist, hacker, and our tech boy. He's the only one that understands what we are doing, along with Jorg, I think. You are both the technicals one here. We just use the computers but don't understand how they work. And it's great to be with you, Eugenio. Eugenio has been part of a lot of some of the meetings that we have been taking part with Martin Vaquero and other friends since a very long time in Barcelona. Now he's in Mexico. He has been in Chile also when we organized this experimental poetry festival more than 10 years ago. So it's great to be with you this day and to know more about your work and also I think about your reflections about what it means, I think, to be doing the kind of stuff that we do, that we like to do in this context. When we started this series, at the beginning, we only talk about the situation. I mean, in the cities, what we were doing, staying in our homes. Then, of course, everything has been evolving. But every time we tend to ask ourselves again, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What is the sense that it has? So it's great to know your reflections, also, and of course, your wonderful work today. So welcome, Eugenio.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bienvenido,
Felipe.
querido.
Martin.
Telemoniaco.
Well, it's really a great pleasure to be here with you today. I have been following the Languages of Iris group in WhatsApp since the beginning, but it's been a crazy time. I'm sure that it's been a crazy time for all of you as well. So I was not able to come to the sessions before. I always wanted, and I missed a lot of you who were presenting your work. I see people who I know and I admire and I like a lot of your work. Some other people I still don't know, and I hope to meet somewhere sometime soon, hopefully. But I really thank Martin and Felipe for inviting me today. Martin, Felipe, and I have known each other for quite a long time. And especially with Martin, I have worked a lot. Maybe not a lot. I mean, I would like to even do more things, but at some point, maybe about 10 years ago, we did lots of things together. We had a lot of fun. We sort of were able to combine Martin's work with voice and performance with my more technical things, and I think it was a great combination. So we need to continue doing things together. And I'm also so happy that Jörg Pieringer is here. I've really admired Jörg's work for quite a long time as well. And last time we met was in Barcelona about 2 years ago, almost. And it was precisely at an event that we put together from the group Sonoras. Maybe Gerard was already here with you and he talked to you about Sonoras. At some point, well, we made this event with Jörg Pieringer. There was also Pia Sommer and Belen Gache. And it was a very crazy mix of press, producing works in a marathon style, printed works. And I really liked Sonoras, which you already know, because it really allowed me to go outside of myself. I have been programming, I have been working with computers since I was 10 years old. So it's been my life. It's my way of making sense. It's my way of expressing myself. So the fact that I had the chance to work at a printing press with with the movable types and old machines and that kind of stuff that Jörg was able to interact with. Also Felipe was there, also Martin was there, Carlos was there. Also I was not together with Carlos, but I really missed that opportunity to work with him. But it was really something, because it allowed me at my old age, I mean, I don't look old, but I am old, please trust me, to learn something new, right? Because we normally think that at some point we stop sort of learning fundamental things. And it's not true. I mean, for me, the last 4 years was a period of a lot of learning how to stop working with computers and start working with movable types and ancient machines and other kinds of techniques which are more close to what the body can do with a machine rather than what the mind and the keyboard can do, right? So I just wanted to say that because I'm really thrilled to be together with you. I mean, we have worked together with some of you. It's been a pleasure, and now maybe I won't talk a lot about the last 5 years, but maybe about older things, which I did about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, more with this sort of thing called digital poetry, which is sort of an academic thing. It's not really a very popular thing, I must say. I mean, there are no digital poets going around and reading their stuff and doing stuff. It's more of an academic thing, which bothers me a little, to tell the truth. Because, okay, academia is fine. I have nothing against academia, but everything gets overanalyzed. It gets very theoretical, very, it's like you need to do crazy things. You need to stop asking why you did this, why you did that, just do it. Follow your instincts, follow your body, your gut, whatever, even if it's with a machine. So I started doing digital poetry because it came natural to me. As I said, I learned to program when I was 10 years old. So that was a really long time ago. Back then, it was a school for a summer school for children who wanted to learn programming. So I was there. And it was the year 1982, actually. And at that time, there was no computer at home, of course. I mean, it was very strange for a family in Mexico City to have a computer. But I was already learning how to program. So what I did after my classes, I started writing my programs on paper. I had an entire notebook of video games written by hand. And of course, I had a lot of fun just imagining what the video games would do when I punched them into the computer. And after some years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I don't remember, eventually a computer arrived at home. So I copied all the video games from the notebook to the keyboard. And of course, everything failed. Everything was full of errors and it didn't work. But then I eventually corrected the games and they were functioning. So I enjoyed a lot writing the games, playing them, and also copying them into these floppy disks, the 5.5 inches floppy disk, the black ones. Maybe you will remember them.
Yeah.
So I copied the games there in those disks and I gave them to my friends at school who also had computers. So that's my background, really. I mean, writing video games on paper, trying to get them to work on the screen, copying them on diskettes and giving them away to my friends. That's why I eventually arrived at digital poetry, not because it was something that I wanted to try, but something that I was already starting with. So of course I didn't invent this whole thing. Digital poetry has a long history and you probably know it even better than me, but there are examples from the 1950s, from the very first computers. The Manchester University computer was programmed by a guy named Strahi. I don't remember his name, Michael Strahi, I think it was. and he made a little program by which the computer wrote love letters, very poetic and very kitsch love letters, right? So it was, many people say that that was the first example of digital poetry. But then you could even go back to Oulipo, for example, and then you have constraint-based poetry. You can go back to the medieval times and you can find Ramon Lull writing the Ars Magna, which is this combinatory wheel to generate thoughts and ideas. So, okay, it's not a history lesson. I just want to show my work, but I just wanted to sort of give you a taste of where does this come from and why I do this. As I said, I started very intuitively. I didn't read the history of digital poetry and then I decided, okay, I want to do digital poetry. It was more the other way around. I found myself doing something and then I realized, okay, what is it that I'm doing? I don't know what is it. So I just went and reviewed the history of digital poetry, and then I sort of faked this idea that no, I know everything about it, and I'm inscribed in this long line of tradition of people doing things with constraints and calculus and calculating poetry. But in reality, I don't know what I'm doing. I just do it because I like it, and that's the bottom line. So, as a programmer, because that's how I like to define myself, programmer, maybe poet, but definitely a programmer. My job is to make tools, to make things that allow people to do other things. Sometimes those hypothetical people is myself, which is, okay, I sometimes do tools that only myself, only I can use, or because they're so complicated and so obscure and so strange that I try to disseminate these tools and get other people to use them, but they say, okay, I don't understand. So in the end, normally it's myself working with my own tools. There have been some people who have also used those tools, but not many, to tell the truth. So what I would like to show you today, and please interrupt me at any time. And I mean, I prepared some things I would like to show, but I can show more things, and just go ahead, ask any questions that you might have. I would like to show you two tools, which were born separately, but at some point they sort of came together more or less, right? Martin, I think, sent you the link to my webpage, which is motorhueso.net.
I send again, it's in the chat.
Yeah.
motorhueso.net.
And basically, all of my work for the past 20 years is there. It's accessible. You can just explore. You can download whatever can be downloaded. It's also, you could say it's my, I like to think about this website as a rhizome, you know, the rhizomes that Deleuze and Guattari were speaking about. They were saying, okay, the life is not a tree, life is more like a rhizome. So you just don't have a hierarchy of things which flow from a center and then become like branches of a tree. It's more like a mess of an entanglement of different things which are connected to each other. So I tend to think, maybe it sounds a little bit pretentious, but I tend to think of Motor Hueso as a rhizome, because I just add things and then those things become connected to other things, and there's really no order. And I refuse to order my website. I refuse to make it more readable and more accessible, because that's a tyranny. The tyranny of accessibility is like considering that the user is dumb. And I don't think that the user is dumb. I think that the user should be given the chance to explore if she wants to, should be given the chance to get lost if she wants to. And if they don't, well, they can just take a look at UX designed websites, which are very correct and very readable, and then that's it. No problem. So if you looked at my website, maybe you found some.
Maybe you can share the screen or something.
Yeah. I will share my screen. I just wanted to start. I will start by showing you a tool called MIDI Poet, which I started working on in 1999. So it was the last century. And the basic idea, I just want to explain what's the background of the MIDI Poet, and then I will show it to you. So back then I was starting to explore poetry, digital possibilities, interfaces, and I was interested in poetry, performance, and real-time interactivity. So at that time, there were not a lot of tools that allowed you to map the movements of the body, for example, or map a musical instrument and turn those signals into text or images. There was a software called Imagine by a Dutch institute called Stein. Maybe some of you know about it. And it was great, but it was very expensive. So I would never have been able to buy it. And so I started working on MIDI Poet, which is basically that. It's a software that allows you to read MIDI messages, which, as you know, it's a musical instruments digital interface, the MIDI protocol, which allows musical instruments to communicate with computers. But you can also have sensor interfaces, which translate the signal from a sensor into a digital signal, a MIDI signal, and then by reading MIDI signals, MIDI Poet can turn these numbers, because in the end, these signals are numbers, into text on screen, the movement, the size of the letters, the position, etc., but also image. So I just worked on this software. The first version was from 1999, but it was too difficult to use for people because it involved a language of its own. It's a programming platform, actually. So I made a simpler version with a graphical interface in 2002. And that's the version that I will show you. It's the latest, and I mean, the latest version is from 20 years ago, okay? It's not a software that is getting updated all the time, as you can imagine. But I just want to show it to you. And maybe I will now share my screen. And okay. So can you see my screen? Yep. Okay. Thanks. Cool. So I prepared some things. So I'm just not looking for for them forever. So MIDI Poet is a software that runs on Windows, and I fucking hate Windows, and I fucking hate Bill Gates. He's a bastard. But at that time in 2002, the only chance of having this kind of interactivity was Windows. The Linux operating system had not developed enough its graphical interface. On Mac, it was quite difficult to do. What I wanted to do was very, very difficult to do on a Mac, and it depended on many things. So that's why I developed it on Windows. And since I'm still using MIDI Poet, I'm stuck with Windows, but I just want to kill this tool eventually and stop using Windows at some point, but we're on Windows, okay? So this is a Windows application which is divided into two parts: the composer and the interpreter, right? So these are two applications that work together. First, I'll show you the interpreter, which is this little orange one. So let me double click on it. And you can download this application from my website. There are because it's a very old application, it needs a special library that you need to install, but it's quite simple. It's all explained there. So I'm going to show you a little example of what it does. It's not an interactive piece. It's just a visual poetry piece that happens by itself. It's an algorithm, okay? So here you have the interface. You choose the file. It's a .mip files, the MIDI Poet files. you create a playlist. In this case, I only have one file. I select it and I play it. So I'm going to play it and let's see what happens. So do you see the screen went black? There is this little orange square in the middle. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, thanks. Because I mean, I'm not sure if it will work in Zoom. So let's press F5. And here you see, it's a very simple algorithm, very, very simple. On top, you see some words in blue, cielo, which in Spanish means sky. And the words green color is earth or ground. And then you see eventually some little stars appearing and some red flowers. So that's a very basic example. It's not interactive. No, I'm not doing anything with my keyboard. It's just happening by itself. So it's a landscape made out of words. And I want to show you several things. First, this little file that I just played is actually a text file which contains instructions. It's actually MIDI-Poet has a programming language. So I will open this file, and here, I'll just make it a little bit larger. This is a language that I designed, and is a language that is sort of working behind the MIDI-Poet pieces, right? So at some point, I figured out that this language would be very difficult for people to understand. I just wanted to make an easier interface for people to actually create their own pieces and play them and use them in whatever way they wanted, right? But here you can see instructions for text, different things, right? So let's see the same code. This is MIDI-Poet code. I'm going to show you the same code using the graphical interface for modifying and creating it. So let's close this one and let's open the composer. That's where the second part comes in. The composer allows you to create these MIDI-Poet pieces, right? So if I open it, I will open the same piece. And here you can see, for those of you who are familiar with Max MSP or Pure Data or other languages which are based in these modules and connections, it's very similar. It was inspired by those kinds of languages. And so here, for example, I have this block, which every cycle of the processor puts, a random word in a random position on the screen. So this little block, what it's doing is putting a word in a random position of the screen, right? So depending on whether the position is on the upper half of the screen, the word will be cielo. And if it's on the lower half of the screen, it will be tierra, right? We can see that here. These blue blocks are conditional blocks. If the position, the Y position, the vertical position is smaller than 300, because I have an area of 600. If it's smaller than 300, means it's in the upper half of the screen, then the word will be cielo. Let's change it to sky. Right? And it's also going to be blue. And on the other hand, if the word, the position of the word is in the lower half of the screen, the vertical value is greater than 300, then the word is tierra. Let's change it to ground. So if I make these changes and I save the composition, the piece, I can execute it again. Let's open it again here with MIDI-Poet. And now you'll see that instead of cielo, tierra, you have sky and ground, right? It looks simple, right? If you want, I can do another little demo before I show you some of the performances, some of the video recordings of the performances, some of them that I did with MIDI Poet. But please, if at any point you have a question, just interrupt and let me know.
Well, Eugenio, super, super. Continuous, marvelous. If you can give another example, could be great for us. Take your time. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
We are analphabets, remember.
What?
We are analphabets. Somos analfabetos.
No.
Analphabets.
Analphabets, something like that.
Analphabets. Yeah, let's start a small piece from scratch. Okay.
Great.
So you have this blank space. So you have this little screen. I'm moving this little toolbar. You see it? You see I'm playing around with it. Okay. This little toolbar was inspired by the Photoshop toolbar that you have different tools for drawing. So here I have different tools for programming the pieces. So this tool I just clicked on, this one, is for changing the background and doing stuff with the background. So if I click on this tool and I click on the screen, I have this little block that says back. It means that in the background, something will happen. And what we want is a very simple piece with a red background. So what I'll do is I'll open this block and I'll say that the red value of the background will be 255. If you don't know about colors on the computer, it's mostly RGB, which means red, green, and blue. And each value has a range from 0 to 255. So 255 means very intense red in this case, and 0 means totally dark. So if I have a red value of 255, it means that the background will be red. So let's just leave it like that, and let's put some text on the screen. So I'm going to click on this block here, in this tool, T, text, and let's put a text block somewhere. It doesn't really matter where I put it. I can just put it anywhere. If I double click here, then I just say it's text number 1. You can have as many text elements that you want. You could have 100 words floating around the screen. Maybe we will do that so you can see how it's done. But for now, I just want one text element, which will say hello. Sorry for the lack of imagination, but it's the first word that pops in my mind. And the position, yeah, the font. Okay, the font will be maybe whatever. Attractive, I like that one. The size, maybe let's give it a 48 points. And then just let's play around with position. Position X will be 100. You know, the screen is a system of coordinates, X and Y. So we give it the X position of 100. The Y position, the vertical position of also 100. And let's make the text white. Okay, so how do I do that? I give it a red value of 255, a green value of 255, and a blue value of 255. Okay, so now I'll have a red screen and the word hello in white at some point in the upper left part of the screen. So I'm going to save my composition and I'm going to call it virus just because we're here. Save it, and then I go to the MIDI Poet player. If I refresh, the virus is here now. Let me add it to the playlist. And if I execute it, okay, it works. See, you have a red screen and the word hello on the upper half. So now we want exactly 1,000 hellos. Not just one, but 1,000 hellos on random positions of the screen. So we want to fill the screen with hellos in random positions. So how do I do that? Okay. I return to the composer. And here instead of having one area, I have from 1 to 1,000. It means we are going to have 1,000 images, 1,000 texts, all with the same features. But what I'm going to change is the position X will have, instead of a fixed value, it will have a random value that goes from 0 to, let's say, 1,000, which is, well, the resolution of my screen is 1,600. So let's make it 1,300. All right, so the position X, the horizontal position is random, and the vertical position is also random. So it will be from 0 to 800, for example, right? So every word will have the same features. It would be hello, same color, same font, same size, but each one with different positions, which will be random. Okay, so you see now this block has changed from 1 to 1,000, means that it covers 1,000 elements in just one block. If I save it, and then I try again to see if it works, let's see what happens. Well, yeah. I mean, believe it or not, there are 1,000 hellos there on the screen. So let's make one more change so you can see a little bit about the interactivity, because I mean, I could go on forever, but I don't want to get you bored. So let's make just one more change. So let's say that I don't have a MIDI keyboard here. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have a MIDI keyboard to show you. But of course, I can also use my computer keyboard to interact with MIDI Poet, right? So I'm going to just use this tool, which is keyboard input. And I'm going to put this block here. And I'm going to say, if I press the A key, then something is going to happen. So let's say, okay, key A. By default, that's the first letter. Okay. But what is going to happen when I press the A key? So I just need to connect the input with the output. So I use this tool to connect things, and I connect this, oops, with this, right? So I mean, you can see it. When I press the A key, this will happen. Before I press the A key, nothing will happen. Let's try it. So let me save it again. Let me run it again, and we have a red screen and nothing is happening until I press the A key. So I'm going to do that right now. And that's it. You see, so I mean, it's a very simple interactivity, very linear, but of course it can get more complex, right? And yeah.
Eugenio, I have a question or comment about the design that the layouts that you're using in this interface, MIDI Poet, but also especially when you talked about your website, which is I think that for people when they come for the first time, it's like they like get surprised. I was thinking because. Especially these days have been very special for the digital literature community because of the death of the Flash. And there were like festivals honoring the Flash and all that, and it was I suffered it very directly because as you know, and I talk about it in this series also, we were preparing our virtual books exhibition with La Oficina de la Nada, and I was looking for some material like 2 days after the like the January 3, and there were lots of works and some of them that I did remember very well that you couldn't access. So what I wanted to say about it is like there's this relationship with the technology, but also with the design, like the aesthetics of the sites and all that. That like we are going very fast and changing technologies and leave the things behind very quickly, right? And it's like kind of the specific status of digital art and digital literature. and in that way, I think it's very interesting that you, I mean, you could see it as a resistance. I mean, you keep using, I imagine, the same layout or very similar that when you created the website, and also you haven't changed the design, the aesthetics of the MIDI pod and other works. So maybe because of not doing anything, it's becoming like a resistance, like not using another version of the software or etc. And well, what happened to the Flash is also to, you can see like the cost of that or the complications of that. So I wanted to know what do you think about it, because I think it's something that, for example, when we studied literature, we don't worry too much about the how do you say, the disparition of the formats or the materiality. I mean, it becomes complex when you're talking about a book of 500 years that maybe you don't understand the letter or something like that. But with digital literature, it's like changing like 10, 20 years. I mean, it's far more complicated to preserve the works. So
Yeah.
how do you see all this very complex explanation of something that's simple? But how do you see it?
Yeah. I think it was Brian Geisen who said we are here to go.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not here forever.
Yeah.
We're just gonna die, basically. So why do we always think about transcendence? Why do we want to keep things, really? Yeah, I mean, there are some things that are worth keeping, but it's not up to us. If somebody wants to keep our work, it's because it's valuable and it's worth keeping. And of course, I'm not against trying to keep your work updated. But this thing, I hate Flash, really. I always hated Flash from the very first day. Because it was a tyranny. And I was living in Barcelona. And Barcelona at that time was like the mecca of graphic design.
Yeah.
So everybody was a graphic designer. And anything you did, if it was not designed by a graphic designer, it was bullshit. It was not even considered. So it was I was living through this sort of tyranny that, okay, I knew how to make websites with HTML, with basic tools, which are still there. And suddenly everybody was turning their websites into Flash. This was around year 2000, 2001. If your website was not done in Flash, then it was worth nothing. Yeah. And it's just marketing. It was just marketing. So I mean, before we started, Felipe, we were talking about this politicization of your own work, right? That sometimes you try to stay outside politics, but actually whatever you do is politics. Right? So by resisting marketing, by standing against marketing and the commodification of the web, which was happening at that point, I mean, year 2000 was the boom of the .com, and my uncle was putting money on the financial sector that was investing into the .com era, and he lost all his money because he didn't even understand what he was putting his money into. So the web was not commodified enough. So the first years of 2000, 2001, 2002, people say, okay, now let's commodify the web. Let's make it marketable. So everything became marketing. And Flash was a very big part of that. And of course, digital poets and people who hack the tools, they are always trying to subvert the tools. So of course they made digital poetry with Flash, which was, okay, Flash is not intended for poetry, but why not? I mean, you can use Flash to make...
No, but I think that it's the same as a political problem when people want to make for their own the language, you know, it's my own language, like Flash is my language. Because I think at the beginning, I used to work with ActionScript, you know, it was not Flash, but it's kind of the same language. wonderful poetry in a way. For me, it was not Flash. It was like open source, one of the first open source programmation. And that's how can in poetry we say that this our creation is like a creation of poetry traverses us in a way, in a different wave. And we talk a lot when we work together for medium poetry. And I remember, and we asked for some mediums who arrived to take in trance, and Eugenio make all the words and projection with media poet, and me the sound in spatialization, and with a casting of mediums, to arrive in a way. And we talk a lot about that, when poetry is not only one creation, a question of ego. And I think with the time we arrive to maybe all the political contest in poetry is about that, and not accept the owners of language in a way, free of association, or free of spelling poetry, or I don't know how degree you go give to liberty, to freedom in your work. Can you, how kind of azar, or how kind of programmation? What is your? I know a little bit your process, but to explain to friends, how will you proceed? What part of azar? What part of necessité? I don't know.
Yes. Wow. Well, I mean, I've had a lot of fun with Martín Vaquero. We had a lot of fun, really.
Yeah. And we will have forever.
And we will still be having fun. But I mean, we really, I think at that point in time, we really got together. Because we were talking about the same things, but using different tools. And then in the end, we were using very similar tools.
Yeah.
And I remember you were using ActionScript, which was a language associated to Flash. And actually, you cannot have ActionScript without Flash, which is like the unfortunate thing. Maybe Martin, Felipe, all of you write poetry in a specific language, English, Spanish, German. And just imagine that someday somebody says, well, I own Spanish. I have the copyright to Spanish. So if you want to use Spanish, then you have to pay. And at some point, Spanish is not interesting because it's not marketable, because it's not, people are not paying a lot of money. So I just discontinue Spanish. And you still wish you could write in Spanish and you know how to do it, but you can't because the platform to do it is not there. So that's what happened with Flash and ActionScript, right? But I mean, thinking about what Martin is saying, if you go to the essence of programming, the essence of programming is like the essence of human languages. You have words that refer to things, you have words that refer to actions, you have words that refer to relationships between things and relationships between things and actions. That's in the human languages. If you think about computer languages, we have the same elements, whatever language you use. You have variables, you have loops, you have conditionals, you have ways of putting randomness into what you do. And I think Martin and I, we share this idea of playing with randomness in the sense that we use randomness in our work, but it's also a controlled randomness. So it's like this cosmic interplay between trying to order chaos, which is always impossible, but this impossibility is what makes it beautiful, because you always try to put some order in chaos. Of course, the chaos that can happen inside a computer is nothing compared to the chaos in the cosmos. But you can have a pretty good simulation of something chaotic or something unpredictable. And that's, I think, the common thread in our work. And yeah, I mean, I really love to design languages. I really love to do this. And I was really amazed to learn that the theory that computer engineers use to design a language is the same generative grammar that Chomsky proposed in the 60s. It was the 60s, I think. And Chomsky said, well, we have this innate grammar that comes hardwired in our brains, and we can design a set of uh, grammatical rules that can describe a language. And that's what he said. And of course, he was completely wrong, because language is not hardwired in the brain. The capacity for language is there, but language itself is not hardwired. The grammar is not somewhere in the brain. That's not true. So even Chomsky realized that he was wrong, and he said, well, generative grammar is not useful for modeling a human language, which is always transforming itself and turning into other things and adding new words and new expressions and new ways of speaking and writing. But computer languages, when you design them, they basically stay the same. They don't evolve through usage. They can change if the engineer that designed the language wants to introduce a change, but the language itself does not evolve through usage. So I was fascinated to learn that the theories from Chomsky were applied to the design of computer languages. And when I designed this language that I showed you, the MIDI-Poet language, I applied the generative grammar theories of Chomsky, and I defined a way to define variables, to define loops, to define constraints, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very simple language, but it goes back to what I was saying. If you forget about ActionScript or BASIC or Java or whatever programming language you have, and you go to the essence of what a computer can do, computers have not changed since the 50s. Also, they have become faster, they have become more powerful, but the internal architecture of the computers is still the same. So that's sort of the basis. And also, to return to Felipe's question of preserving digital works. Okay, if you want to preserve a digital work, then you have to go to the code, right? And maybe I can show you something that I was not planning to show you, but I can show it to you because I think it sort of aligns itself very well with Felipe's question. So let me just share my screen with you. And yeah, I think you can see it. Do you see the browser?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So let me just show you one thing. Talking about preserving old work, translating from one computer language to another. Remember when I was telling you, when I was a kid, I had a notebook, and I was writing programs by hand on that notebook, and then I copied them to the computer. So at some point, many years later, I found that notebook in my parents' house. It was like 12, 13 years ago, or that time. Here's the notebook itself. So I had the notebook, I had the code written on the notebook. I had the floppy disks where the games were saved, but the floppy disks were not working because they had become demagnetized. So digital media is very unstable. It's probably the most unstable medium that we have invented. And paper here is much more stable. So I had the code of my games. This one, for example, yeah, let's look at this one. So this, I don't know if you can see it, but this is the code that I wrote when I was 10 years old on the old notebook. And this was a very old video game that was supposed to be Dracula's castles and Dracula's labyrinths, you know. So I looked at the code. Here's like the transcription of the code.
Which language is Eugenio? It's basic, no?
That language was BASIC. It was a Commodore 64 computer, and I was writing in BASIC. So this is the BASIC program, but I had no way to run it because the computer was also not available. I lost it at some point. I'm very sorry.
Aprieta cualquier tecla.
Yeah. So what I did was to translate this code. I mean, to sort of interpret what it was doing. to sort of remember what were the intentions, translate basic code to Java, more specifically to processing code, and make the games run again. So I'm going to show you the game itself. I mean, here is the code, and let me show you the game itself. And I try to preserve the aesthetics of the game. So you can see here, I mean, this is my 10-year-old brain that you're watching in action. So this is the Black Widow, this is Dracula, this is the treasure, and this is you. So if you press any key, then you're lost in this labyrinth. Here I am the blue zero. I don't know if there is any psychological implication of being a blue zero. But then Dracula is sort of following me, and I have to just get to the treasure. And I got it. Yeah. So next level.
Oh, that's beautiful, Eugenio. I don't know if
we can buy it in Amazon, where we can buy
No, it's for free. I've been giving away my stuff all my life.
No,
I want to play. Send the link, please, of that game, Eugenio.
Yeah.
I love your word. We're friends from ever, but please give me that pleasure of directly link, because
I'm going to give you the link with pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it here.
Childhood games.
Yep. And yeah.
I remember very much the same that you're doing, because at that time, I don't know if you're older than me or I am older than you, but
I'm older.
No, I don't think so. But I have a Sinclair, and then the ZX Spectrum, which was a very common computer. I really loved it. I remember when I changed from having black and white to colors, it was like, and sound, it was incredible. And I also programmed very basic games, but I remember I made a game about James Bond. That's the only thing I remember. I had it on cassette, not on floppy disk. But probably that cassette is also demagnetized. And I also remember buying programs, but what you really bought was a book with the code written completely. Then you transcribe it, and of course you missed on one line or one letter, and it never worked. But I remember buying some books that were like this choose your own adventure books, but in the computer, and it was impossible to run, because at any moment you can have a mistake and it didn't work. But wow, it's wonderful to see your games. I remember exactly the same situation.
And you speak, when you program in that language, Eugenio, you speak in first person of singular or first person of plural? Do you think about like a lyric, hablante lírico?
Yeah.
No, who is the subject in the middle of that?
You're always giving orders to the computer, so it's imperative. Every language is imperative.
Print, let, go to.
Do this, do that. So, I mean, I think that's why many people like computers so much, because the computers allow people to be slave masters for a while. Yeah, I mean, it's not a nice thing to say, but actually the computer becomes your slave. Of course, you need to know the language. You need to know what you're ordering. As Felipe said, I mean, if you type a program and you make one mistake, the program will not work. So it's very demanding. It's very frustrating.
But you can follow the same idea of Miles Davis. The fail note is not the wrong movement. Is the laster, you know, el que viene después, no? It comes after that. And that is a kind of, I remember when we make performance with Eugenio, that kind of exploring movement, sounds, when images, in a moment, everything works in a different way that we thought, but at the same time, that's what the knowledge who arrives to the performance, to poetry. I remember with Eugenio in Casa de las Américas in Madrid, and like putting a recorder, a H2N recorder in under the the sofa in the floor, because it was like ghost movement in that house. There were a really like presence of ghost, really knowing that La Casa de las Americas in Madrid. And with Eugenio in the middle of the night, with putting a recorder under, like a sofa to receive that kind of presence. And the next day we have the meeting with mediums. And anyway, I love in the world that kind of connection with the digital and the soul and the telluric, like feelings of your heart, of your soul, of your politics. Or you also work with cell phones in Tanzania. I don't know, you were sequestered by people. Maybe you can like ask us a little bit about those work that you make. For me, if I was also everywhere, it was a mystery. That you told me that several times, but still like, wow, where are Eugenio now? With connection, with like low hi-fi technology.
Yeah, I'm always doing things. I'll try to connect to what Martin is saying. We still with MIDI Poet, because I really want to show you something else, which involves performance, using MIDI Poet as a tool for performance. And I'm very happy to see Gerard here. Gerard, ¿qué tal, tío? So actually, Gerard is going to help me, because I want to show you a performance which is called When. And maybe you remember, Gerard, that we did this together with Martin, actually, in Media Lab in 2009 in Madrid.
Which night was there? But I think was my best performance ever in Spain. But the three of us, we reconnected 1 week living together with Gerard Altayo, Eugenio Tisselli, invited by Gonzalo Scarpa, and we have one real week of rehearsal before the performance. It was great. Go on, Eugenio. Wow.
So I just want to confirm with Gerard, what does the ideogram when mean?
It's characters or language. Yeah, idioma.
Yeah, thanks. So I mean, Gerard knows Chinese. He can speak, he can write Chinese. I don't. But I was fascinated by this ideogram when, because at the same time it meant language, as Gerard just said. But if you see the shape, it's a shape like a body with like a head and arms and little legs. So for me, this connection was really fascinating, that the drawing of the word language looked like a human. So this for me was like the starting point for a performance that I want to show you. So let me share the screen. Okay, I'm going to share. I made a small playlist for you, but I'm just going to show you a very small section of this performance called When. And one thing, well, I'm not going to tell you how this performance is done. It's done with MIDI Poet, but you will see that there are some things that are happening, like there's a coordination between what is being projected on the wall and what my movements are. So I will explain it to you later. Okay, so let me show you When. Just let me know if you see it. And I will not share the sound, but because the sound is very low and maybe you won't listen to it. It was a performance done in 2009 in Barcelona. And I want to show you two short fragments of this piece. First one is around minute 4. So here we go. So what you see is a wall, and what is being projected on the wall is what is happening with MIDI Poet. This is one part I wanted to show you, and I will show you another fragment, which happens later. It's a long performance, well, not so long, but it lasts like 15 minutes or something. And let me show you this second part, and then I will explain a little bit what's happening. So what's happening there, I'm sort of interacting with the projection. And maybe you could think that I was using a camera that was recognizing my silhouette and then sort of mapping the image of my silhouette to some sort of signal. But I was really using my mobile phone, which you cannot see, it's on my other hand, right? This was 2009, so we had these phones with the keypad. It's not a touch phone, it was the old kind of phones. And what I did was a small program on the phone that when you press the key, it sent a Bluetooth signal to the computer. In the computer, there was another program that transformed that signal into a MIDI message, and then that message was sent to MIDI Poet. So that is how I was using my mobile phone as a controller. I had it sort of hidden in my hand, but at some point I showed it so that I sort of revealed the trick to the people. And yeah, I mean, these were the kinds of things that I was doing.
I don't know if I dreamed about, but before to make it by real in your phone, you told me you at first you make like a theater representation of movement, or I dream in my impression of a spectator of your work. I really don't know really. Did you create that first in your like body language? O sea, no sé, no sé si me entiendes, Eugenio, pero siento que no sé si me lo contaste alguna vez o lo soñé, porque en este momento se me están mezclando los mundos, pero
I think I told you about it.
sí.
because this is the piece that I performed together with you and Gerard. Each one of us was doing a different thing, but when I was together with you and Gerard, this is the piece that I made. And I just thought about the different movements that I wanted to do. So if you look at the keypad, it's a square thing that is divided into different sections, and then each section does something. But I mean, you were talking about magic and technology, and I think about this phrase, this quote by Arthur C. Clarke that says that any technology which is sophisticated enough can be confused with magic, or is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that's a very dangerous idea, because of course you can do tricks with technology and you can make it look like magic, right? But I've been reading a book, and I'm thinking about technique and magic, and actually the book I'm reading is called Technique and Magic. If you don't know about this book, I recommend it because it's a beautiful book by Federico Campagna.
Send it, please.
I can send it to you. I have it here as a PDF, so if you're interested,
send it later in the group.
I will send it to you via WhatsApp. But this book actually creates a very strong contrast between the cosmos of technique and the cosmos of magic. And the fact that we are confusing technology with magic leads us to think about technology as if it was something that is supernatural, something that is almost has a religious quality. And that's why we're running behind technology, because we worship technology. And I think this is very dangerous. It has to do with what I was talking with Felipe before about how we're always running behind technology, and technology is developed according to marketing strategies and capitalist strategies, and not because of
I love
an esoteric quest. I don't know, Martin.
Yeah, at the same, at the same time, I was thinking about the first technology could be the fire, in a way. I feel when I make performance in a moment, I think the most technologic thing that I made finally is burn poetry, because like in fire you have that kind of, when the people go against the king, they burn, the city, burning things, a kind of the first expression. We talked already before the mission about violence and how, and not to be violent, but to use the format of violence, to create new kind of words in poetry. And that, I think that maybe the political position of the poet in that way how we create new kind of guerrillas of language. And I remember when you make like that kind of graffitis in a theater or outside, we make a lot of the telemoniacos in Madrid, the people who are present around, that we call with Eduardo el extended cachondeo. Those moments between, like, when poetry and reality are not so far, and they cross each other, and how we can propose that to like a kind of movement to the fear of the human being in a way.
I like those ideas. I mean, I really like this idea of infiltrating poetry into daily life and creating these distortions that destroy automatisms in language. I really like that idea. And I think that's something that you are doing, Martin, that the people I know here are doing, this idea of introducing distortions into language. The fact that I do it using computers and not fire, for example, is a little bit paradoxical, I think. And I'm also thinking about this theory. There is a linguist, a Peruvian linguist called Montalbetti. What's his name?
Mario
Montalbetti. Yeah, sorry, I forgot.
Wonderful poet and linguist.
he's great. I mean, his poetry is fantastic, and his theoretical work is also fantastic. And I was reading a text by Mario Montalbetti, and in turn he's sharing his readings of Alain Badiou, right? Maybe you know this philosopher Alain Badiou. And so Mario Montalbetti, he draws this shape. You see this ellipse? And he says, okay, let's say that language is something that has limits, right? If you could look at language from outside, you could see language as something that has limits. And of course, because it's an ellipse, it has two opposite sides. So on one side, he puts the matheme. You see the matheme. If you cannot read it, it's the it comes from math, from mathematics, the matheme. So matheme is a Lacanian term that stands for the mathematical enunciation. If I say X is equal to A plus B, that's a matheme. And the issue here is that a matheme is very precise, because when I say X is equal to A plus B, it means that X is only the sum of A plus B, and it's not A minus B or A divided by B. It's A plus B and nothing else. So that's where language becomes very precise. And on the other end of language, there is the poem. So he makes this opposition. Poem and mathematics are in opposite extremes of language. Because poetry, I mean, the poetry that we like, is not telling us about the experience of our daily lives. It can have infinite meanings. It does not have a precise meaning. It can have infinite meanings. So this is, I mean, it's not something I made up. This is Mario Montalbetti reading Alain Badiou, right? So if you think about computer algorithms, which are an application of the matheme because they are based on mathematics and logic, if you're using mathematics and logic to create poetry, then this diagram collapses, right? Because the opposites of language are being put together, and then language collapses, or something like that. What I think is that it doesn't actually collapse, and that the algorithms, the program made in MIDI-Poet that I just showed you, is not a matheme. It's an application of the matheme, but has an autonomy. It's an autonomous agent. It's a non-human writer that writes without us. And this is very interesting. If we think that we are not the only writers on this planet, and also computers, but fire writes, the rivers write, the animals write, everything in this planet is a writer. So if we think about computers as writers, not as things that we order to do something or something else, then we have a third limit of language, and language becomes expanded. And down here you have the techneme, which is a technical agent that becomes autonomous and generates language. And this language is put together with human language, but this language does not care about precision and does not care about ambiguity like poetry. It's a language that does not have meaning. It's a language that is completely independent from human will, from meaning, from semiotics, from anything. It's just language, just material. So that's where I think that magic happens, here in the middle. The magic right now is that anything that we read, we don't know if it comes from a human or from a machine. We don't know if it comes from a human or from a non-human. And that really expands our vision of reality, I think.
It's also, maybe if you want to add, because I think this idea of the precision of the mathematical language is also, I don't believe that really, because I don't know, in computer programming there's this problem where if you write a program and you're not able to prove that it will have a definite end, So that's a mathematical problem, and there has been ways to try to solve it, and there are Alan Turing proved that it is not solvable. So if you write a program, you cannot say by mathematical rules that this program will have a definite end. So it's not precise because you probably don't know how it will end, whatever, because you cannot prove it. So even the mathematical language has imprecision built in already. So it's already a poem in a way.
I agree. I agree with you, Jörg. But this is why I was saying that a computer program is not a matheme.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. This technique has also some sort of free will. Yes. That, for example, it has this indetermination that you as a human, you make this program, but you don't know when will it stop. I think you're talking about the stopping problem.
Yes, the stopping problem.
And it's very real. I mean, so you could say that in some point there is not a linear direction between the human will and what the computer is doing. And this also happens with text generators, that you can create a neural network and put it, fill it with a lot of data and train it to generate text. But you don't know exactly what it will generate and how will it generate it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that computer programs are not mathemes, but actually they are agents that have some degree of free will. And this free will introduces itself in the world of language. So actually, at some point, we become confused because when we start reading something, we cannot be 100% sure if it was generated by a human or by a computer. And I think it's happening.
Also because these computer programs and all these things we program, they don't exist as mathematical problems alone, because we program them, we change them. And if we interact with, I don't know, a neural network for creating language, then we already implemented our humanity into these things. So they are already not totally technical anymore. They are already containing the language we use. So they're already human.
Yes.
Partly, only a small part, but they are already, part of it is human.
It's like Ian Bogost says it, they're very persuasive, because they persuade us by generating language that looks like language generated by humans, but the way in which it is generated is very different. The way in which machines learn is very different from the way that humans learn. Machines are processing symbols, but not meanings, and we tend to think that we're processing also meanings when we think, but machines are only processing symbols. It's like, I mean, also the learning process. If you want to teach a computer to recognize a cat, you have to show it 10,000 cats, like 10,000 pictures of cats, and then the next cat the computer sees, the computer will say, oh, that's a cat. But if you show one cat to a baby, then that baby can recognize 10,000 cats after just looking at one. So that also involves experience, the real life experience, and experience the essence of the cat.
That's really important, Eugenio, but that is hallucination, and hallucination is the first psychic movement in the spirit, that you describe really well. The difference of the human being is the capacity of hallucination, when you're a baby and you're like, wow, you see, I remember that when Ramon Llull, you talk about him and all his influence in us, he was in a cave for 40 days and he go outside from the cave and he go all the clouds writing in Hebrew or Kabbalah, numbers, words, because in Kabbalah you have a number and a letter who correspond a different kind of equation of things. And when we make a poem, in a way, the Celtic people, they say that the language is some trees. Every letter is a tree in Celtic. And then you create like a poem, you create a garden. And that garden became living in a way. And in which moment all the technology is that just that, capacity of giving life to new language. You know? Hey. Edwin, go
Eugenio,
ahead.
no, it's so beautiful. I love everything that you're saying. There's a really interesting discussion about the relationship to control, and how I love how you're bringing the creation of language in computers, but also the creation of language in poetry. And I wonder, I wonder about, you're saying that the computer feels this or does that, and how much, my question is, how much of our humanity are we putting into what we think the computer is telling us? How much are we imagining as poetic, as creative human beings? How much of that, of our human characteristics, do we put into the matheme, into the equation? And I don't have an answer, and I don't know if you have an answer. I think it's a question of where poetry comes in, where poetry, or else, if not poetry, language, where language, as we're trying to create language, where that can come in and filter in between the discussion. The language of the code is the poem, and so forth. So there's an interesting conversation about the authority of power, the authority of control, and how much we have that in our life as poets, in our life as humans, and how much of that can become something that we can share with the world. That's not just, code. And then does that then become language? So,
Yeah. Thanks for that lovely question and comment, Edwin. I of course I don't have an answer, but I do think that we tend to anthropomorphize everything that we find, right? And that's only natural. I mean, there are these theories, phenomenological theories, that say that every living being tends to see and imagine the world around itself in its own image. So the ants, they anthropomorphize the forest. The flutes, they flutemorphize the wind. So the humans, they anthropomorphize everything that they find. So what does that mean? That we tend to see funny faces in animals. We tend to see human behavior in animals. We tend to say, oh, that dog is very happy, and we don't know what does it mean for a dog to actually have feelings. And of course they do have feelings, but maybe to us they look happy, but they're not happy at all. So when it comes to language, I think there is this idea of a poet that wants to write something and to convey a meaning, right? I want to channel a meaning into what I'm writing. But I've always thought, and maybe I'm wrong, that meaning cannot be transmitted. You can transmit the words. You can very skillfully craft a poem and sort of try to elicit a meaning from the reader. But you actually cannot control that process, because whatever I write, I don't have the control of how it will be interpreted by people. Maybe I share meanings with my community, Mexico City, in Barcelona, but if I give my poem to somebody in Tanzania or in wherever, they will completely interpret it in a very different way, which will be surprising, and it escapes my control. So it's not about giving away control and saying it doesn't matter because anything goes. I still sort of want to play around with something, but I also know that that something will mean different things to different people. And that's really the like the essence of another work I wanted to show you, but I don't know, Felipe and Martin, if we still have time or...
The last one before the collective trance.
Okay, yeah. I'm going very quickly show you one more tool, and I'm going to go
Before that,
quickly.
I just wanted to comment that all your idea of like every living being is writing. It reminds me a beautiful metaphor that the medievals used. The idea of the book of the world as a book, as a book that is full of signs. Of course, the difference is that it's written by God, but I like very much that idea that if and changing it in the opposite direction. I mean, we can read everything. That is something that Martin Gavins always says about the experience he had in Writers Forum, to read the walls, read the audience, read the people, but we also can read the nature, whatever. And that is an idea that was present in the medieval times.
Ramon Llull, he said that absolutely that same experience, and all the mystic that they call that metanoia, you know, that kind of transformation of soul, the mystic of the first cycle in the Gnostic, you know, Christian people, that kind of moment when you like not trying to give or order to the other what the meaning that you have to say, you know, like the poet who wants to explain to the reader what he feel or what he thought, you know, and just like that, that connection and that moment with the poet can just like be like kind of pencil, something like that, a little hit to allow that connection between the creator and the receiver, like an antenna or a speaker in a way, like really sensitive. If I want to, if I believe in reincarnation, I think I will reincarnate in a microphone or a speaker or something like that. And you know that microphone who arrived on in the 18, we have a microphone to arrive to Mars. The 18, yeah. Perseverance have 2 microphones inside, and I think if we have the chance, you can, if you can listen first the sound, because after that they used to follow down, you know, they just let the live transmission, and then the political they now give the sound of other planets is too dangerous for poets in the world. And I don't know, I read the other way that books of the Talmud, you know, the Talmud writings with Kabbalistic inside, and they have some different books inside the books, you know, and because there were different writers of the book, and they create that only one book. And you talk before about that software you want to organize a collective performance about a software that you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can go directly to this collective writing, because I mean,
no, but please,
you told me
there's no like.
No, there's no. So maybe I just wanted to show this final tool. I'm going to go very quickly because it's also in Spanish. So maybe many of you will not understand the words actually.
Those who don't believe in Spanish can go out.
I own Spanish, so I can decide who understands it or not. But it's called computer-aided poetry, or in Spanish it's called poesía asistida por computadora. There is a version in English and also a version in Catalan. These 2 versions are not working very well right now, but I'm going to show you the version in Spanish. Basically, it's a tool it's online. You can also use it. Of course, you have to write in Spanish to use it. But the thing is, you enter a phrase. This phrase is automatically translated into English. Then I go to a database of synonyms in English, and I substitute the words for synonyms, and then I translate it back to Spanish. So I enter a phrase, and the computer gives me a different phrase in return, which is semantically related to the first phrase because there is this synonymy relationship between words. So let me just show you how it works. 1 second that I will share the screen. So this is back. And I'm just going to enter one phrase. let me just copy one phrase. I'm going to read you a poem later that was made using this method. And the title of that poem, which I'm later going to read, is Luz Abierta en Canal, which I cannot really translate. It's a very kitsch and romantic, and if you see this in a poem, it's like very, well, it's not the kind of poetry that I like, but it's a phrase in Spanish. It would be like the light is open, is open wide. That's a possible translation. So what I'm going to do is execute the algorithm and see what it gives me back, okay? So I press this button, and it gives me encendedor indeciso en tomar, a lighter undecided in taking. So it started with light open wide, and it gave me a lighter undecided in taking, right? So you see there is a semantic relationship between these two phrases. If I distort the phrase again, I mean, there is a problem of stopping here because it could go on forever. It's not really the problem of stopping that Jörg was talking about, but I could keep on going forever. And now it gave me más ligero no comprometido para soportar, which is a very strange sentence in Spanish. It would be lighter, but not in the sense of a fire lighter, but it means more light. Lighter, not compromised to stand. It's a very strange phrase, right? So this strange tool, I have used it for the last 15 years to write poetry. So most of the poetry that I write, I use this tool to actually create the verses. So I wrote an entire book, which I'm going to show you now. This is the little book I wrote in Spanish using that tool. And let me read you a poem which has the same starting phrase as the one we just put. Luz abierta en canal. It has the same title as the phrase that we typed a while ago. But you will see it gave me a completely different result because there is a random element every time I run the algorithm. Why? Because every word does not have a single synonym. In fact, the whole concept of synonyms is completely wrong. There are no two words that mean exactly the same, but we can talk about semantic fields. And if I start with the word light, then the algorithm actually chooses one other word from that same semantic field, right? So I'm going to read you the poem, which starts like this: Luz abierta en canal, expansivo fluorescente en el cañón, expandir el metro, vaya de excursión la poesía, para vagar en la escarcha, para peregrinar en la depresión, para dirigir en el problema. Sea el mandamás el obstáculo, lumbrera el enganchón, la bahía la imperfección. So this poem does not mean anything. It has a semantic coherence, but it does not have a meaning because it was algorithmically generated. It's the techneme generating language. So it's a book entirely made up of poems which have no intention, no meaning, just process. This process of semantic chaining. So there's this little book. I also use this algorithm to write a book together with a dear Catalan poet that passed away some years ago, Carles Acmor. And we sort of exchanged verses, and what he sent to me, I just distorted it using the algorithm. It's a book that I really love. It's very close to my heart. And then also with Gerard at Sonoras, we made an entire book called Hipercamuflaje, which is filled with poems made in that way. I mean, it's a more complicated technique. But I mean, to me, it's really interesting to play around in this way. I mean, if you see this diagram, is poet and machine. So the machine is giving me the output, but I'm also sort of giving it some input. So it's not like just generative poetry that you have an algorithm that gives you a bunch of poems and that's it. I write the first phrase, then the computer gives me something. Maybe I put a little bit of corrections in the phrase. Then I put that phrase again back, and it's like a loop, like this, right? And of course, it's not artificial intelligence, but it's the computer generating language, which has no truth value, right? It is not a true thing. It's not a false thing. It does not have any relationship to truth or meaning. It's just language derived from a process. And this is what I am interested in. This is what I've been trying to say.
It's a kind of political contest in a way, you know, don't to give power to the words in a meaning, you know, like the great, and that is I was thinking about that kind of mathematics is when you can a conglomeration of things or something is lost, you know, when an object arrives or disappears, and that simple count who creates you can create 1 and 2 who becomes like a water, and 3 becomes air, and 4 I don't know, um, give to the poets that kind of freedom to use the language, mathematic language, computing language, insect language, virus.
Yeah.
Martin, it's also sort of giving the power over to the reader. It's letting go, and it's up to you to determine what you want.
Yeah, of course, you know. And that is terrible now because the people, we are fear now with pandemic state, and then we have to create vaccine because we think that we know the enemy, but there is no enemy. You know, enemy, it's not enemy. Language is just combination of things who happens. That I love in the work of Eugenio, you know, that kind of connection with deeps, the lyrics, things who became metaphysical, and that digital waves of playing make that object become real. And I don't know, Media Poet, one of the first software created for poetry in the world, I think. No?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe, but I'm interested in the process. The tool, I mean, I just presented you some tools, but the tools are not important. The important thing is what Martin is saying, and also Edwin is saying, that what are we doing with language and what the reader is doing with language. I mean, it's when somebody asks me, what does this poem mean? I say, well, what does it mean to you? I mean, it's not important what it means for me, because actually for me, it doesn't mean nothing. When I read the poems in this book, I don't recognize them. It's not like my poems. And every time I read them, I become surprised because it's unexpected. Oh, did the computer really write this phrase? I mean, wow. So it doesn't have a meaning that I want to transmit. It's up to the person who reads it. And I completely like that idea, because then it opens up a very open space, which is also political. It's not about controlling meaning. It's not about giving out meanings to the people. It's about inviting the people to create their own meanings. And I think that we are very much used to be given meanings. I mean, please give me meanings. And that's why every night I watch Netflix, because I want meanings. Okay, give me meanings. And it's very sad. I mean, because we're not making meanings. I mean, all of us here, we are creating meaning in very different ways, but we are not tyrants that want to push our meanings into the faces of the people. But most people there say, oh, please give me something that I don't have to make sense about. Please give me something that is easy to understand. Please give me something to just relax and eat popcorn and relax, because capitalism is crushing me. So I just want a very easy to understand thing, which is okay. I understand that. I mean, people are suffering. But what if we stopped this whole culture of putting out meanings in the world and telling people this is a series about crime and this is a series about love and hate. This is about nothing. This is about whatever you make of it. And that's what I really like. And you can, of course, do it without computers. Computers are just a tool to do it. But you can, Carles Akmor, this poet, he did the same thing completely without computers. He could create these incredible poems which had no meaning, but were invitations to create your own meaning if you wanted to. And if you didn't want to create meaning, then that's also okay. But that's for me, that's the essence of what I'm trying to do. Lately, not so much because I'm a little bit busy, unfortunately, but whenever I can, I do things. And just as a last thing, I already shared with you, I think some weeks ago, a long poem made with this same tool that I showed you, and also with MIDI Poet. So it's putting together the two tools that I showed you. Again, I'm sorry it's in Spanish, so maybe you can just appreciate the shape of the words on the screen, but maybe what I just explained can help you try to create your own sense for what you're seeing. And maybe that's all on my side, but I wanted to invite you. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm using Zoom every day. Every day I'm here, and I'm so happy to see you, really, because I haven't seen you in quite a while, so it makes me very happy to see you. But the screen itself is very like, okay, Zoom, we're all in these little boxes. You know, it's Martin is in the box left to me, and Andres and Gerard is down here, and there are other ways of interacting when we cannot be together. So I wanted to share with you this tool. I didn't create it, but I love it. It's called Framapad. Maybe you know about it. It's a collaborative writing tool. And what I will do is I will give you the link to the Framapad, and you will figure out how to use it, because it's very simple. You just write. But you will see other people also writing. So what I would invite you to do is that after we say goodbye, we can continue talking for a while using the Framapad, which I'll share with you here on the chat.
Yeah, can you put it on the screen? So because we are recording this session, and
Yeah.
so
Okay.
instead of our sounds, today we'll make it silently.
Yeah, so I'm going to share the screen. If you click on that link, you will go to the Framapad. We will all be able to write together about whatever you want. And that's a way of also being connected, I think. So let me share the screen. Yeah, can you see it, the Framapad? Yeah, somebody's writing. So I'm going to delete this default text. And I love you people. Okay, somebody's playing around. Yeah, we can continue there for as long as we want.
Cool.
Colors are people?
Colors are people. Yeah, I don't want to develop that idea, but yeah, colors are people. People are not colors.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just joking, sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Great.
that's our collective performance.
Great.
Great.
Continue here.
I want to ask something before we pass to this.
Yeah.
I was wondering, while I heard you about artificial intelligence that you mentioned, and maybe the simple question is, the short question is, what place do you give, or do you think does have the artificial intelligence in this movement? I could say of technology and arts. There's Jennifer Walsh. She's a singer and musicologist. She wrote about artificial intelligence as we have to know why we are composing music, for instance, for not being like eaten by artificial intelligence in the short future, in few years, because there are already many artificial bots composing music, and it's really outstanding. I mean, it's unimaginable. Of course, that for sure is happening with literature in some ways. What there's a risk for you in artificial intelligence? There's what happens there in this kind of work that you are doing with many people?
Mm-hmm. I used to be very angry at artificial intelligence because I said, there's no way that you're simulating intelligence. You don't even, I mean, when I was thinking about the people who developed artificial intelligence, I was saying, you don't even know what is intelligence. You cannot even define it. So how can you develop artificial intelligence? So I used to think that some time ago. But then I continued thinking, and I'm still thinking, and I don't have a definitive answer. But I think first about the words of an Australian poet called Amy Ireland, which is not very well known, but I really admire her work, and she's great. And at some point in an interview, she says, something very exciting is about to happen to the future of writing. And the fact that it doesn't have anything to do with you should not be a bad thing. And what she means is that something is going to happen to writing and the humans have nothing to do with it. Or they have something to do with it, but not directly, just indirectly. Also, I've also been thinking and reading about what does it mean to have a mind. And Martin knows a lot more about this, but I've been reading Reza Negarestani, which is a Persian, Iranian philosopher. And he says, well, mind is not a thing. Mind is what it does. So that opens up a whole new space of thinking that not only humans have a mind, not only animals have a mind, but a glass of water has a mind. If it does something that looks intelligent or has the appearance of being intelligent. So for me, it's a huge opportunity of getting rid of the human exceptionalism, of thinking that we are the center of the universe and the center of the ecosystem. And just as writers, just to realize what I was trying to say a while ago, that everything writes on this planet. So the humans are not the only ones who write literature, poetry, music, everything writes. And the fact that we have artificial intelligence can help us to come around the idea that things that are written by other beings, including computers, can also be artifacts of culture, valuable artifacts that we incorporate into our culture, but are not made by us. So for me, it's a very exciting idea, but of course, the human loses importance. And it's not easy to accept, but at the same time, it's very liberating, I think.
Right.
Hi, Eugenio.
Yeah, hello.
I'm Thomas. Say everyone right. but I would like to know more about the relation of digital poetry and environment. Because, for example, I'm thinking in servidores of internet, things like that. That is a big damage. We are damaging nature, you know? So there are organisms that are not thinking as us, and we are making damage. Forgive my English, by the way. But so I understand, and this everyone we have this language, and I like this that is an ecological way to think the poetry. But on the other hand, with the computer, we are throwing away batteries, we are throwing away many things, and with this waste, we are damaging the nature, and with this, we are damaging the organism that maybe have a chance to think like us, you know? So I want to ask you about the relation of your digital poetry with the environment.
Thank you, Thomas, for asking that question, because I'm also asking that question myself, and I think it's a huge paradox. And by coincidence, I was teaching a class the other day. Exactly, we were talking about that, the very same thing you're talking about. And let me read you very quickly. I will try to translate because I have it in Spanish, but it's a quote from Jussi Parikka, who wrote this book called Geology of Media. He's talking exactly about the same things. I mean, what is the environmental cost of digital poetry, of computers, of servers, of the internet? And these are statistics which are very updated. They're from like 2 or 3 years ago. He says 36% of all the tin, 25% of all the cobalt, 15% of all the palladium, 15% of all the silver, 9% of all the gold, 2% of all the copper, 1% of all the aluminum that is produced every year in the world is used in the fabrication of our electronic devices. A common smartphone, for example, contains 13.7 grams of copper, 0.189 of silver, 0.028 of gold, 0.014 of palladium for every 100 grams, besides other minerals such as cobalt, lithium, nickel, tin, zinc, chromium, tantalum, and cadmium. So our computers are filled with minerals, and mining, as you know, is not a very clean activity. It destroys rivers, it destroys mountains, communities, forests, etc. So of course it is a very big paradox. And what I actually wrote a text about it, which fortunately is in English and Spanish, so I can send it to you maybe, so I can share my ideas with you. I don't have but what I think is that if we use computers to displace the human from the center and accept the idea that other beings can also write, then at some point, maybe, we can get rid of computers, but already having this idea that we are not at the center and that also the animals and the rivers and the trees can write. And it sounds like a little bit of a hippie thing, but I think it's also a question of survival, of really accepting and valuing trees and rivers as writers, not just as something that is there and we can take water from the river and take wood from the tree. So I'm happy that you asked the question, because it's also a question that I've been asking myself. And actually at some point I was doing a lot of electronic literature very productive. And I just, when I realized these ideas, this damage to the environment, I sort of stopped. Not completely, but I reduced my activity because I thought that it was not sustainable. So yeah, I definitely agree that that is a paradox that we need to talk about.
But isn't
I'm very sensitive to that topic, so I'm happy to hear your answer. Thank you so much.
But I don't know. I ask these questions myself a lot because I use computers a lot and a lot of technology, and also related to these dangers of artificial intelligence. I think for me, the problem is not technology, because technology can go this way or can go this way, because mining is a dirty operation. But why is mining a dirty operation? Because it's done to be most cost effective, and the people who do it, they don't have to pay for the things they do. They don't have to pay for the animals they kill. They don't have to pay for the deaths they cause and all these things. If they would have to, then it would be different. And if we would live in a society where cost would not be the I don't know, the utmost importance, then maybe it would all be different, because we would care for environment more. And also the reason why artificial intelligence is dangerous, or one of the reasons why it is dangerous, it's because it's owned by the tech corporations, and their only objective is making money. And that's why they mine your data. They live from your data, and they also are trained by the data, but of people that are looking to make money. So they kind of learn how to be capitalist humans. And so they are dangerous, because capitalism is dangerous, as we can see every day. And I think that's more the problem than technology, because it's like I don't know, you can kill somebody with a knife, or you can cut something which is useful. So it's.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jörg. I mean, I don't think there are certainly some values that are embedded in technology, but we have some degree of agency to modify these values. So I don't think that technology is the problem by itself. And
it's a problem because it's used for making problems, or it's designed to make problems.
Yeah, but I see what you say. But if we consider the price of externalities, the economic externalities into the computer, and as you were saying, the people who are mining, they should pay for the animals they kill, for the rivers that they pollute. But then perhaps the price of the computer would be like one computer would cost $100,000 or something like that. Because
I don't know, because I think, like, when you consider, you have this, right? This is a smartphone, and this is a computer that is extremely powerful compared to, I don't know, the C64 you had, and it has a battery that can power this extremely powerful computer. And that was completely impossible 20 years ago, because it was not important, because nobody cared for designing batteries, computers that were very power efficient. And now, because it would not be important if we only had computers standing in our rooms, because then power is not that expensive. But now, because we have to carry them, and that's very fashionable, and everybody wants to have a portable computer with them, now it's possible to make this energy. But we could have done it maybe 20 years ago. We could have made power efficient technology 20 years ago if it was only a priority. So if you make, I don't know, environment the utmost priority, then it would be possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can get there eventually.
We have to.
The change is not technological, because the technology is already there. It's more cultural mindset.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, the people who are making these phones, they're not thinking about the environment. They're thinking about maximizing profits.
Absolutely. Yes.
So if that mindset could change, then we can have phones which are accessible and also respectful for the environment. I think we can get there, but I think there is still a long way to go.
Is it something about storage and that what you were saying about letting things go? And
so I see there's some
So
beautiful.
you speak louder, or your microphone. You have the same problem that the last time. Maybe you have to put like
yeah,
direct sound.
Can you hear me now? Yep.
Eugenio?
Yeah,
Zoe,
yes.
we lost Zoe. Zoe was singing the same thing. Yeah, now.
No.
Does it work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So it shouldn't work. Well, there you go. Yeah. So what I was wondering was, because you were talking about the death, and well, I was hearing it as death, but just losing things, dying, losing things, like when we were talking about Flash, and that sort of disappearance of things that we don't accept. Is that also something about just technology, that it's keeping everything, which is part of the environmental problem? And I suppose I was also, because you mentioned Amy Ireland, she's translated Francois Bonnet, who's very interesting on this, on the idea of a constant present, which is tied up with the immediacy of everything forever. But that, I mean, that is also, that's part of the reason for the environmental issue. Perhaps it's a different question.
Yeah, it maybe becomes something like a spiral that we need more technology to preserve older technology. So it creates a spiral which is never ending.
Yeah.
And at some point, something that is not very present in Western cultures is the idea of letting go.
Yeah.
We're all afraid of dying. We're all afraid of letting go. And I mean, to me, the fact that digital technologies are very unstable, it presents the opportunity of learning how to let go. I mean, I showed you my games from when I was a child, which I recovered from a notebook. And I wanted to do that just to see what happened, but I've lost a lot of pieces also. There are many digital pieces which don't exist anymore. And I'm sort of having that as a training for letting other things go, and to making myself more related to death. Actually, I think that's one of the big problems that I don't like to use the word problem, but everything for the last year has been in relation to death, everything in the world. And I'm not saying that we should let ourselves just die. What I'm saying is that we should learn how to die better, all of us. And dying better means living better, I think.
Yes. Yes, actually, so the live moment, or the consciousness of the thing that will disappear is being really alive, and and that's also the thing that is encroached upon by the endless storage. But I mean, so I think that's probably a bit off the track of what you were talking about. I just wanted to say that was fantastic. I've enjoyed this so much, and it's really opened up lots of really great lines of thinking, and thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you.
Eugenio, you are talking about the technology in a very open mind way. So I take the opportunity to ask you, because I've been in conference, but they are always very academic and is difficult because they start talking about the program and the thing. But now we are in this atmosphere. But this maybe it's a very naive question. How can you spread this digital poetry to other community? For example, third world communities that has not access to this easily to this technology. I know, for example, everyone nowadays has access to mobiles, telephones. So you can make things with telephones and you can create apps with telephones. But how these people, maybe with not so much education, can start to use these apps or things to make registers or things like that. I don't know if I explain myself.
Yes, I think I got your question, Tomás, and I think it's a very interesting question because, as you say, I mean, many people around the world, even people who don't have electricity or don't have water, they have mobile phones and they have access to the internet. And this is something that you can see. I don't know if you're in Latin America. I'm in Mexico, and if you go to the south of Mexico, you can find communities without water and electricity, but with internet access, which is via satellite and solar powered and these kinds of things. I don't think we can, of course, share what we are doing with them and tell them, okay, I'm doing this. What do you think? Do you like it? Maybe you don't like it. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you. I think that what I would like to see is that these communities, these people, develop by themselves their own idea of how to use technology, let's say in a poetic or artistic way. To some extent, this is happening in some places of Mexico, where young people who are already working with technology are starting by themselves to use their own languages, their own indigenous languages, to create poetry, which is available on the phone and has some level of interaction or something. And to me, this has to happen organically, not like we go there and teach them how to do it. It's more like, okay, they have the tools, they have a very rich culture. So at some point they will create their own connections between their culture and the tools that came to them in some way or another. And I think about the textiles. Here in Mexico, there is a very strong tradition of textiles and patterns and designs made by indigenous people. And when the weaving machines came from Europe, of course, this was a technology that was coming from outside. But instead of saying, okay, now let's teach these people how to use these weaving machines as they use them in Europe, they started to sort of adopting these machines and use them in their own ways to create their own patterns and their own designs, which are very different from European designs. So at some point, this is what I would like to see in indigenous cultures developing their own ways of doing electronic poetry without a lot of interference from outside. That's what I would like to see. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, yes, in a way, you know, it's Well, no, it's a big topic anyway,
It is.
so it's a very wide topic, but in your way, yeah.
Yeah. I've been for the last 10 years I've been working with farmers in Tanzania, so and they're using mobile phones. So I mean, they use the phones in their own way, which are always surprising, and it's very different from what we do. So I like to see that. I like to see them use the same technologies that we use, but in a very different way. And let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I would like to watch that work. Of course.
I can send you. I can send you a lot of things. You will hate me because I will just put. I will throw you a lot of things, but I will send you some things via the WhatsApp group, and maybe.
No, I know this relation about third world countries and technology is very interesting because they also have access to the technology. So all of them have a mobile, and there is an education with these tools. And that is very interesting. So I mean, I don't criticize your point of view. No, so I know it's an effort to make something with them. And that is great. That is great to work with farmers, as you were telling me. Because you are registered. Well, maybe it's for another session where I was asking what are you doing with the farmers?
Yeah, maybe for another session, because it's a long
another session.
It's a long story, but I wanted to show you here on the screen. This is a Zapotec person whose name is Rodrigo Perez from Oaxaca in Mexico, from the Zapotec culture. And he's in some way making digital poetry. This is one example. It's written in the Zapotec language, and it's based in the ideas of Dada. So I just wanted to show this example of how people from indigenous cultures, they adopt ideas that are coming from other places, but then they make them grow in their own land. So it's just an example. There is also an interactive poem made by
and that is very related with the last question about environment, because, for example, how in general, how the technology affects these communities, because, for example, the servers or all the batteries are thrown away in general in the land of these communities, you know. So because that's it, you know. Third world throw the rubbish into the third country, you know. So
yes, but I think it's a little bit more complex than that, because it's not like good versus bad. Because if you go to these communities, they will say, we want to use computers. We want to translate Firefox into Zapotec language. We want to use the internet and have our own Wikipedia in the Zapotec or the Mije or the Nahuatl language. So it's not like these people are victims. These people are not victims. These people are not victims. What they want is to adopt that technologies and use them in their own ways.
Hmm.
And of course, there's a lot of injustice, and the biggest dump of electronic trash is in Nairobi, for example, and there is a huge one in Indonesia. But the people in Kenya, they invented electronic money, for example. The electronic money transactions via SMS were invented in Kenya. So we cannot divide the world like first world and third world. There is a lot more complexity. And there are many technical and technological innovations that are coming from Africa, from many places that we consider as being like the receivers of technology or like the receivers of electronic pollution. I think this is what I've seen for the last years.
No, of course. Thank you, Eugenio. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
I will mute me.
No, it's fine.
No, but it's true that is more complex and on that, but maybe the topic is not related about poetry itself, so we are don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed a lot talking to you, but I have to go because so there are people waiting for me in a class that I am not supposed to be teaching, but moderating. Oh. So it's fine. I mean, I could go on talking to you for many hours, and I'm also so happy to see you after so much time. But I really need to go now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your curiosity
really great.
in every way. And it's wonderful.
Great.
Eugenio, great, man.
Abrazadas, Alex, Gerardo. Thank you so much.
You will lose the last performance collective, Eugenio. Sorry.
No, I will continue with the Framapad.
Yeah.
And I will throw you a lot of things in the WhatsApp group, so you will be hearing about me.
Thank you. And I guess, yeah, but lots of us have to go. I do have to go also. But let's keep open this Framapad window so we can continue talking, and maybe we can start writing onomatopoeic words.
But just being in silence, like just
like that. Exactly.
Connected, like creative language. Martín Gávez, Andrés Amantes, Juan Carlos Soto Romano, George Ping, Federico Esner, Zoe Schooling, Angelina, Felipe. Oh, we're together. That is incredible. How?
Well, see you next week. We have to organize the schedule, Martin, tomorrow.
Okay, chef.
See you.
Next date.
See you.
Andrés, espera, no, Andrés, Martín, guys, Carlos, no se vayan. No se vayan. ¿Dónde están?
Bye bye.
Bye.
Felipe, no sé. Chao, George. See you tomorrow in dreams tonight.